That's right. Welcome back, folks, to Is It Time for Notre Dame to join the Big Ten edition of the Always Irish Show? As always, do hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up if you approve of the content. Hit notifications. That way you're alerted every time there's a new episode. Who knows when they're going to be? I used to have a kind of a routine. The news is hot and heavy, so hit the notifications. You'll be alerted every time a new show pops up. Twitter, search bar, Always Irish, rat, Always Irish Inc. Emails, alwaysirishnt@gmail.com. Audio only anywhere you want me. You could get me call-in line, 312-900-8815. I got a feeling no matter what happens, it's going to be a call-in show type of deal. Stay tuned. So, here we are, folks, 4th of July weekend, and what's happening? The entire college football country is waiting with bated breath to see what irrelevant Notre Dame's going to do next. It is the most unhealthy dynamic there could be, the way everybody else approaches Notre Dame. They all hate us, and they also want to date us. It is the most unhealthy relationship type you could imagine. Everybody hates Notre Dame. Notre Dame don't play anybody. They're a has-been. They're nothing. They're garbage. Don't let them in the playoff anymore. And then spots open up in their power conferences, and they all want Notre Dame to sign up. You don't get to have both. But as far as being irrelevant goes, which I hear multiple times a day, number one trending on Twitter, how is that irrelevant? Even it doesn't matter if it's negative stuff. Relevance. Being talked about equals relevance, positively or negatively. It just does. So they all hate us, but they also want to date us. Okay. I thought Notre Dame was probably going to have more time to sit, let the dust settle, and see where they're at after some other pieces shift. If you read the social media reports and believe them, it looks like Notre Dame's actually going to move forward a little faster with a Big Ten decision out of respect for some other schools that are waiting to see what Notre Dame's going to do to figure out what they're going to do. This trickle-down effect. Okay, there's no doubt right now Notre Dame's the belle of the ball, the hottest girl that doesn't have a date. Everybody wants them. So all these other ancillary moves are going to be dependent on what Notre Dame does do or doesn't do. So with that all in mind, what do we make of this entire dynamic, you ask? Let's start here. I think Notre Dame joining the ACC full-time seems like the least likely outcome to me now, which I wouldn't have said even 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think the ACC is very, very unstable. They're on shaky ground. Here's the other thing with the ACC that I see coming. I don't think the SEC is going to sit there and let the Big Ten make all these moves and get more power teams with big brands, USC and all that. The next move I expect the SEC to do is to approach Clemson, Florida State, and Miami and say, you're the 3 biggest brands in the ACC. Geographically, it makes sense. Join us. And then whatever else happens with the rest of the ACC teams, go for it. So that's what I see happening to the ACC. So I think that's the least smart move for Notre Dame now is to go full bore, join there. Then what do you do when the SEC poaches those ACC powers? Then Notre Dame's there with their pants down. So I think that scenario's out. Okay, very unstable. And depending on what media reports you read, some people are saying that Notre Dame has already looked into what it would cost to pay out that ACC buyout clause and whatever be done with it. I don't know what to believe, but I think joining the ACC's out. So Pac-12, Big 12, who knows? Nobody knows what's going to happen there. They're in flux. So that all leads us to Notre Dame's pending decision. I think it's between holding Pat longer as an independent to let things shake out, or jump in and finally join the new look Big Ten. And I say new look because the new look part of the Big Ten is what I think has some Notre Dame fans that were anti-Big Ten no matter what, a little bit more open to the idea now that some of the dynamics of the Big Ten have shifted and changed. Okay, let's start here. Let's start with Notre Dame Athletic Director Captain Jack Swarbrick a while back giving an interview and naming 3 items that if they change could cause Notre Dame to join a conference. Swarbrick laid out 3 things. 1, lack of a viable TV partner. 2, unfair or unviable path to the playoff. Meaning, I'm assuming if you're independent, there's all these extra hurdles. You're never going to make it, that kind of thing. And number 3, the money disparity between being independent and being in one of these big TV conference deals, the SEC, Big Ten primarily. They're the big breadwinners. Okay. The money disparity being too big between staying independent and missing out on the TV revenue. So those are the 3 items Jack told you as the main decision maker here would impact Notre Dame's decision to feel like at some point they may be forced into a move. Let's discuss these 3 items. Number 1, lack of a viable TV partner. Well, I guess that depends on how you describe viable. Like there's nuance even in these 3 items. What's viable? On the surface, $15 million a year from your own TV deal with NBC sounds great. Not compared to $100 million guaranteed if you join the Big Ten network. That's $85 million more guaranteed per year. Anybody worried about what that ACC buyout's going to be? It's like 1 year of lost revenue in the Big Ten TV deal, and then it's all plus again. That's a non-factor. And I'd be telling the Big Ten, if you want us to do this, you could pitch in and buy out some of that ACC deal if Jack's that serious about it. So that's number 1. Is that viable? Well, who defines viable? Rutgers is getting $100 million a year, not winning anything ever, being bad at football. Notre Dame's really good, making $15 a year. How do you define viable? That's a big gap, big financial gap. Number 2, the playoff path access. This is a question nobody knows the answer to. If this turns into a mega 2025 team SEC, mega 2025 team Big Ten conference, who gets to decide what that playoff access is even going to look like? What's the playoff going to look like? Who's in that chair that gets to say what it's going to look like, what the structure is, who's invited, and how they get in or out? Nobody knows that yet. Nobody knows that yet. Who makes that call? Is this as simple as those powers saying to Notre Dame, if you're not in this fully, you're not being in the playoff? So you could go join the minor leagues that the Big 12 and the Pac-12, whatever's left of the ACC's doing, but you're not getting in the playoff. Then what do you do if you're Notre Dame? Your hand is pretty much forced. But who makes those decisions? I don't know. And then number 3 kind of relates to number 1, the money difference. We already covered it. $85 million more a year guaranteed is quite the raise to just keep doing what you've been doing. That's a big raise. $15 million a year to around $100 million a year. Okay? That's a big, big gap. So my question to you, whether you're a Notre Dame fan or a fan of anybody else, when you look at these 3 items, have you reached the tipping point on any one of the 3 or more than one of the 3? Where is your line of that critical mass point to where you feel like you're forced to make this decision or you're not going to be able to compete in the modern world that college football is turning into, what it's going to look like? I get tradition. I love independence. I love that unique feature about Notre Dame. It's a big part of who we are for a lot of Notre Dame fans. I love it. At what point do you get bumped up against this where you have to choose between your old traditions, and choosing the old traditions guarantees you're not going to make any new ones? That's where I think this all comes to a head for Notre Dame people, Notre Dame fans, the administration. At what point does holding on and clinging on to your old tradition, is that going to stop you from being able to build any new traditions for the next generations of Notre Dame fans to enjoy because you're just not in the mix or not making enough money to be able to compete with facilities, paying staff, NIL, wherever that money's going to go? That's the big philosophical, existential Notre Dame question here. Where is that tipping point? Okay? I think if Notre Dame folks are more open to the Big Ten now than ever before, I understand why. Look at the changes in the Big Ten. This discussion's different now than it would have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Totally different discussion. So I think that's why you're seeing some Notre Dame people starting to open their minds to the Big Ten deal a little more. Think about it. What does Notre Dame want to maintain their independence for? They want to be able to play coast to coast and maintain that Rockne tradition. Under the new Big Ten, New York, LA, Chicago, you got it. You're going to have all those markets still. Notre Dame always wanted Southern Cal on the schedule, did not want to have to give that up if they joined the conference full time. They're in the Big Ten now. You don't even have to worry about giving up that rivalry at all. It is not lost on me to think that the Big Ten was thinking of all this push for USC, knowing that would entice Notre Dame even more. I think those things are connected to some extent. How much, I can't say. Some extent, though, for sure. Notre Dame wants to keep traditional games. That's a big deal to Notre Dame. Well, you have USC still. You would have Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Penn State, Wisconsin, Oregon, if they join. Those would all turn into big games. Again, you could play Michigan every year in this model. And we know what a circus that would be. All right? Like, if this turns into two mega huge conferences, what if Notre Dame says we're going to stay independent and see what happens? We don't know that because I don't know the powers that be, how they're going to set this up, what the playoff access is going to look like. Nobody knows. I'm still of the opinion, even if the Big Ten said we're only taking 20 teams and Notre Dame, you have 4th of July weekend to figure it out and then we're moving on. I don't care what they say. If Notre Dame says we're independent, comes back to the Big Ten next year, the year after, says we want to join now, when things are more structured, they're going to say yes. Oh, John, that's going to throw off the amount of teams. They'll figure it out. The value that Notre Dame brand's going to bring, they'll figure it out. They're not going to say no to Notre Dame. I still stand by my position I said a few days ago. People think Notre Dame has a lot of pressure here. They could hold off a year, still then go to the Big Ten. They're not going to say no. They're going to make it work because of that Notre Dame brand and the money that comes with it. Period. Okay? So here's what I could see happening. Swarbrick could get up there and say, we talked about it. We think the best decision is to hold pat now. The environment's too unstable. We're going to maintain our independence, see where the dust settles in a couple years with all this stuff. See if there's more structure to the playoff path, what that looks like. That's one path Jack could take. The other path is Jack's a lawyer. He knows how to present stuff. I could see Jack joining the Big Ten and presenting this as all wins for Notre Dame in every way. For a lot of the reasons I said. National schedule, keep your biggest rivalries, regrow some with Purdue and Michigan State, keep USC, play all over the country, same path to the playoff as everybody else, no extra hurdles, and oh, by the way, an extra $85 million a year for the program to be able to build new facilities, do the stuff Kelly was mad we weren't able to do when he was there. I could see Jack saying that. He's smart enough to phrase it as it's all wins. What he could get up there and go, Notre Dame, what are you really giving up? You got the main stuff you wanted now. National schedule, your biggest rivalry still in the boat. same playoff access, way more money. If Jack gets up there and presents that argument, what you're losing then is tradition. Being that team known as being independent, like that's what you're going to have to give up. But on the back end, you're not losing as much as you would joining the Big Ten a couple years ago. So if there was ever a time for this offer to appeal to Notre Dame, now's it. Now's it. And I'm not going to let this show go by without reminding people, especially the dumb ones, that are saying Notre Dame had a chance to join the Big Ten before in the 90s or whatever. They didn't do it. Screw them. The reason Notre Dame is not already in the Big Ten, and it has been for over 100 years, damn near 100 years now, is open, anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant bigot, Michigan's very own Fielding Yost, blackballing Notre Dame and Newt Rockne, forcing them to schedule nationally to be able to field a team and have a season. That is the reason we're not already in the Big Ten, is because of that bigot that Michigan worships. That's the reason. How convenient it is that a lot of these people forget that bigoted history. All right? So, if Jack is dead serious about this and he's negotiating now instead of flipping burgers on 4th of July weekend, if Jack's serious, my advice to him would be, you're the hottest girl without a date right now. Negotiate anything and everything you can to benefit Notre Dame. Play the ACC side, throw a line in the SEC pool. I don't know. But when you're the one everybody wants and the whole country's waiting on you, that means you have leverage. Negotiate anything and everything you can. If he's going down this path with the Big Ten for real, you negotiate the shit out of it and get whatever you can. Whether it means you don't give up the Big Ten contract, but you keep most of it or all of it, plus the Big Ten shit, whatever it takes. Get greedy. The most they could say is no. But when you were the hottest girl without a date, you get to throw some stuff out, see what sticks. So these are wild times. Things are changing fast. I don't know what Notre Dame's going to do here, but I'm going to say this. If ever there was a time Big Ten membership looked attractive to Notre Dame people, it's got to be now over any time at any point in history. Because if you practically look at it, it could be framed that you're not giving up much at all and you're gaining a lot. So that's a healthy pitch from the Big Ten. Let's see how Captain Jack navigates this. But it has got the college football world hanging on every tweet and every update from any entity. What's going to happen here? Not bad for a tiny, irrelevant school in the middle of Indiana, is it? Happy 4th of July.